Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Michael. Well, I'm pleased to moderate the first panel. We have a very nice varied panel with two representatives from the business companies, from stakeholders from Senegal and South Africa. We have one representative, well, former policymaker, and we also have in the end Michael as a representative of an international organization and what can international organizations do in this space. So without further ado, I would like to invite Aziz. Aziz Sai is the project manager at CTIC Dakar.
CTIC, you're almost there.
Sorry. Which is one of the leading incubators in East Africa, in West Africa. And we are happy to have him and hear his experience. Aziz, it's all yours. Oh, and let me say for Aziz and for all the panelists that we will try to keep the discussions short at the maximum of 8 minutes so we can have a longer Q&A session at the end.
Fantastic. Thank you, Martin. So first of all, I'd like to thank the Institute for International Economics and Policy and the World Bank for their invitation. It's really fantastic and a great honor being here, especially being an international affairs graduate myself. So really nice being here. As Martin said, I am a project manager at an ICT incubator in Senegal, West Africa. So let me translate that for you, for those of you that are not in the tech world. An incubator is basically a physical space. These days it's not even physical all the time, but it's basically a space where businesses go to get help on everything that can make them reach their growth objectives. So businesses come to us and we help them on their strategy, maybe on their commercial development, on anything they need to be competitive in the market, basically. So that's what I do. A number of these businesses are involved in digital trade and are trying to have an impact in that specific sector. So let me just give you some very quick context on Senegal. So it's a country with 14 million inhabitants, French-speaking, with a banking rate of 15%. So that'd be 85% of people in Senegal do not have a bank account, and you probably have even less than that, so maybe 10% or even less than that of the population that has a credit card. So and you'll find the relevance of this later. I myself haven't used a credit card in a long time, which is very inconvenient being in Washington. But I'll say a little more about that later. There are two ways for me, and that's where the title is extremely interesting. There are two ways for me to discuss digital trade. One of them is the impact that it has on trade as we know it, actually. So basically the fact of digitalizing trade as we know it. And the other one is the fact of revolutionizing trade. And what do I mean by that? That's the angle that I'm going to try to discuss it in. Creating business relationships that are not there in trade as we know it, and that are created by the fact of digitalizing the processes. What examples am I going to give you? I have these few sites that are there, so I'm going to start with these two, Tong Tong and Mluma. So I hope you can see their titles. What these websites, what these platforms allow you to do is, if you're a customer in an urban setting, in Senegal, for example, what these allow you to do is they allow you to order vegetables or even livestock, if you need that, from producers or farmers that are outside of the urban limits. So in rural settings, and right now most of the population still lives in urban settings in Senegal, and most farmers and most agriculturists work from rural settings. So what this allows you to do is to be in contact immediately with people that you wouldn't be in contact with in normal days, and to order whatever you need to order from them. How it usually happens is you have, I guess you could call them brokers, retailers, or middlemen, basically, that go take either livestock or vegetables from people, usually peasants working in rural settings, and that would sell it to you as an urban client at a very expensive price, and that acquire it at a very cheap price. This allows you to have more transparency on the actual prices, and they allow you to directly order from peasants. So gives you more choice as a customer, and it also allows the person selling you these things to, see the person that they're selling to, and basically grow in terms of their revenues, and in terms of their processes as well. Another example is Nyokobok. So this one is in a very different business. Basically, what they do is that they will allow Senegalese people from the diaspora, people who are in either, I don't know, they can be in the U.S., they can be Senegalese people, right? They can be in the U.S., they can be in France, to send food. Actually to their families or to their close ones that are still in Senegal. Again, what usually happens is that people from the diaspora usually either wait till they go back home or send money through other means to their families, and that money sometimes get lost, or they usually trust middlemen to do that job, and that money often is used to do things that it was not intended for. So what it allows to do is then again brings a lot more transparency into the processes, and allows you to be in direct contact and to have a direct business relation with the people that you're trying to reach, and that's that's a use of the digital that has made digital trade unavoidable, basically, in Senegal, contrarily to the other more traditional use, which is to just look at the trade relationships, the trade processes that already exist, and digitalize them. And that's something that's hard to do, and that doesn't really happen simply because the cultural habits basically are very set in their ways, so to speak, and it's very hard for people to change them, and also because again, because the banking system is what it is, people don't have access to credit cards, etc. So it makes it very difficult to trade differently, unless you really have to, unless you really have a reason to. And these different platforms have done. So Tool, the last one I'll present, is a platform that allows women that transform. Maybe they'll do. There are a lot of local fruits in Senegal that you probably don't know them here, bissap, mad, etc. So they're very seasonal, and they're fruits that you would mostly find in these areas. And what they do is now they're transforming them, turning them into juices, jellies, etc. And so this allows you to look at what is being done by these women and to order directly from them. So in these circumstances, you have to use the digital to be exposed to these people, to be exposed to their work, and to directly order from them. When you don't have to, it's a lot more difficult to have that impact, but when you do have to, that's where it really happens. So just in terms of what policymakers, I guess, can do to make this more of the norm. For one thing that's very important is to make sure that people have the payment systems that go along with the digitalization of trade in Africa, and that's a big thing. Obviously, in Africa, as I said, the banking rate is extremely low. To replace that, what tools other than cash, and they're there nowadays. You probably heard about M-Pesa, you heard about mobile banking. Actually, one very common tool is mobile banking, and one very common tool in Senegal is called the USSD. So it allows you to pay using your phone. And one problem with that is that it's very dependent on the historical operator. That's in Senegal, it's called Orange. And one thing that the government can do maybe is to make sure that this payment system is democratized, because the technology exists, etc. Also, a lot of the economy is informal in Senegal. And one thing that the governments can do is just to make sure that they put in the necessary incentives so that a lot more people want to get back to a more formalized way of doing business, which is permitted actually by digital trade. And if not, people that do digital trade, even though they're having an impact and even though what they're doing is extremely interesting, unfortunately are competing against a lot of informal either middlemen, brokers, retailers, etc., that again are doing a work that doesn't really benefit. So, just back to the title, just to conclude, the potential is there. Obviously, I think what matters is whether it's a revolution in terms of trade as we know it, or whether it's just trade as we know it digitalized, which in this case isn't really an end to it. And that's what I would like to leave you with. Thank you.
Thanks, Aziz, a lot, especially for that Swiss punctuality and 8 minutes sharp. Well, unless you want to see the presentations of others, what do you prefer? Let me invite Daniel Adidwa. He's the CEO of Tour 2.0. one website from South Africa focused on tourism.
That's right, Jeff. Wait, you guys closed. Sorry, just get into the files. There we are. Fantastic. Good afternoon, everyone. Hi. As Martin said, my name is Daniel Adidwa, and I represent a company called Tour 2.0. And in short, what we are is a company that aims to create new African perceptions by connecting international visitors to local community-based tour guides who are able to offer very unique community and cultural experiences. So right now, we actually have a presence across South Africa, and during the course of next year, we're going to be expanding throughout SADC. And as you see, a lot of our clients are actually international visitors coming into South Africa at this current stage. And as I said, we are an online platform. So I'd just like to really just share our story of the learnings that we have had to date as a young company and the red tape associated with it. So, so no, with regards to us, I mean, it was very key to be able to accept online payments through our platform. And just getting there was quite a hurdle. I'm Kenyan originally, so just imagine if a Kenyan guy gets tired running, it's quite a long race. But in short, one thing we realized is that in order to get to accept payments through our website or our platform, you have to have what they call a merchant number. And in some local banks, you'd need to have had a corporate bank account for at least 24 months. Imagine as a startup in order to actually qualify for a merchant number. And once you got that, then it's a step of basically integrating with various payment gateways and then looking at companies like your PayPal as an alternative to actually accepting payment. And granted, PayPal is also another good alternative, but we also got to look at, once you've integrated it to your platform, how do you withdraw it to your local corporate bank account, which is also another challenge that a lot of local companies, especially us, we also had. Fortunately, we were banking with the right bank. So it's looking at how best we make it much simpler for companies like us to enable people to pay via our platforms and not move on to any other payment gateway. Second thing is language. We've got a lot of clients who are maybe German of origin, Spanish, and a lot of them like to, especially when it comes to the tourism products, they like to read the content in their own language, and things like very small grammatical errors that you may encounter if you use something like your Google Translate will definitely lead to a drop-off in terms of sales. Like, these guys, they don't even know what they're really saying, so why should I give them my money? So how best can you enable startups to access accurate and affordable translation services? One way we've actually going about this is actually by getting a revenue share deal with the local translation company, because the current model is that they charge you per translation per word. So if you're doing 500 word article, over 100 of them for a startup, it becomes a very, very, very expensive. So I was really looking at how other alternatives to actually modify this. That is the skills. Especially when it comes to e-commerce, it's very essential to have people who have the programmers, who have the relevant skills when it comes to integrating your front end, your back end with the payment gateways and things like that. So a lot of companies, I'm sure it's not unique to South Africa or Africa alone, is attaining and retaining the skills and ensuring that they do not go to corporate, which is a very big ask. One way we found is that if an incubator or an accelerator basically hires these skills internally and deploys them amongst the startups that they choose to incubate, that could be a nice way for startups to avoid that hectic cost of highly skilled individuals. And the last for us, which is very critical, is up-to-date data. So data that is up-to-date and more importantly, affordable. So what we found is that if you're looking at data from, let's just say, your public stats institutions, you'd find that a lot of them are maybe 3 years up-to-date. And if you're in e-commerce, 3 years that's dinosaur times, in essence. And if you want the latest up-to-date data, you'd have to pay quite a lot for it. So this is probably a good opportunity for incubators and accelerators also play a role in terms of purchasing and the relevant data for the companies within their umbrella. So at least we're able to attain the relevant insights and also scale up based on insights instead of making those mistakes that we didn't necessarily need to make because of the lack of data. And yes, those are literally my four lessons for now until we get into the Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel, very much. Let me invite Diego Molano. Diego used to be the Minister of Information and Communication Technology in Colombia from 2010 to 2015. He's, and in such position, he led one of the main projects in IT development called Vive Digital. And now he's an advisor to CEOs and governments on IT policy. And we are happy to have him. Diego, todo tuyo.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for the invite. It is really a pleasure to be here to talk about these issues, the digital trade. In order to have digital trade in a country, there are some bases, some pillars. The first one is telecommunications. Without telecommunications, there is no digital trade. So we need people connected to the internet. So that's key, and what we did in Colombia was great. We went from very, very low internet penetration to deploying infrastructure everywhere, even in the middle of the jungle, with high-speed networks, with fiber optics. We went from just 20% of the municipalities connected to internet to 100% of the municipalities connected to high-speed internet networks. 96% of them just with fiber. That's key. Bringing technology to everybody is key to unlock the potential of digital trade. But that is not enough. That is not enough. The second element here is to enable the application world to develop solutions, applications to unlock that trade. What kind of problems we have today? One that was mentioned before, payment systems. Today, about 62% of adults in the world have access to bank accounts only. But if you go to the developing world, that's very, very poor. In Colombia, it was just like 30% when I started as a minister. And then, so we thought, what can we do to massify banking using technology? The first thing, changing regulation, banking regulation. Because banks now are used to very nice big margins serving the rich of the world, but they are kind of a bit lazy serving the poor of the world with lower margins. So what we did was we went to the banks and we told them, look, you have 2 years. If you don't go to that market, we change the rules of the game, and we did it. They didn't go, so we did it. So we created new banks with a lighter banking regulation to spread services in the base of the pyramid. That's great. So we have a lot. And we have very good examples in Africa, and in some countries in Latin America using electronic payments. And that's improving everywhere in the world. That's improving everywhere in the world. And you have also to deregulate other issues like the electronic bill, electronic invoices. And you have to really encourage the growth of regulations that open the market. Today, in many countries, Martin, in yours, for example, in Argentina, they have a huge discussion whether or not they allowed Uber to work or PayPal, and you're going to talk about that tomorrow. Those countries who are blocking the new economy are hurting themselves in the long run. That's proven. So that's the second element, having the right environment to develop the applications. That's key. And the third element is logistics, the traditional trade barrier. If you don't have the logistics aligned to move goods around, that's a problem. So what we did in Colombia was just unlocking and expanding technology and unlocking the barriers we had. and encourage people to develop their own applications. Of course, there are many, many global platforms being built now to do international trade: Alibaba, eBay, Amazon. And many of those platforms are done in the Silicon Valley. When I go to the Silicon Valley, I really envy them because they have the right ecosystem, they have the talent, they have the money. But one thing that they don't know is the understanding of what a poor person is. They have no clue what a poor person is. They imagine what a poor person is based on Hollywood movies. But they have no clue what the real problems of those people are. So we have a huge opportunity. And today, an entrepreneur, as it was shown before, from any of the developing country connected to the internet has a huge potential to disrupt any business. And what we have to do is empowering them to do that. And let me show you this video, this short video, as an example of that.
Mi mami nos tuvo a una temprana edad. Ella siempre estuvo sola.
Me enteré que a los 8 meses que tenía mellizos, a los 7 meses, perdón, que tenía mellizos, pues obviamente lloré como 3 horas porque, pues, te imaginas, sola y con hijos, 2 hijos, ¿qué iba a hacer? Tocó iniciar a trabajar, a rebuscarme por cualquier parte. Entonces fue cuando decidí iniciar en el cultivo de la cebolla.
Aunque muchos años han habido muchas pérdidas, mi mami siempre nos ha sabido sacar adelante. Ella siempre nos ha inculcado pues valores, siempre nos ha dicho que tenemos que emprender, que pues así no tengamos toda la plata. Seamos felices.
Como familia queremos salir adelante, queremos que nuestro futuro sea mejor, queremos que nuestra calidad de vida mejore.
Nosotros lo que queremos es que como productores podamos vender nuestra cosecha directamente a los consumidores. Entonces de allí nace la idea de Comproagro.
Decidimos crear una iniciativa para pues, ayudar a nuestra comunidad para mejorar un poco la sociedad.
Comproagro no solamente es un beneficio para Alejandra, para Brian, para mí, sino es un beneficio para toda nuestra comunidad. Comproagro lo que quiere es inicia a dar sus primeros pasos para dignificar al campesino colombiano, para permitirle que él dé a conocer sus productos.
El emprendimiento ha cambiado nuestra vida y nuestra forma de pensar. Es para saber que, digamos, los sueños se cumplen, que teniendo fe y luchando por un sueño, esto se puede lograr.
Comproagro es como el cultivo de la cebolla, tiene muchos sacrificios, pero a la final vale la pena.
This is a story of a family in the Colombian mountains. They grow onions. And these 2 teenagers, thanks to internet, in the middle of nowhere, they roll into our program to encourage entrepreneurship. And they learn to develop applications and to write the business plan. I met them last year in an event, and they already had a business plan, clients, a product. And I asked them, how was it? And the lady said, look, had I sold my last crop in the regular market, I would have gotten 10 million pesos. Thanks to the internet, thanks to the application, I got 12 million pesos. That difference, the 2 million peso difference, is a lot of money for her, all the money for her. And what you see in Colombia is thousands of kids like these ones developing applications because they have everything. They know the market. They know what a business plan is. They have the technology in their hands. And this is going to be massive in the world. Today we have 3.3 billion internet users in the world, growing every day. Very soon, they are going to match the number of cell phone users. Now we have more cell phones than people in the world. But there are many people who have 2 or 3 cell phones. So there is about 5.5 billion people with cell phones. So soon we are going to have the same number of internet users. Internet is going to be everywhere, everywhere. And trade is going to change dramatically. And just to finish, let me show you one a couple of slides, and you're going to see that in detail tomorrow at lunchtime in the McKinsey presentation. I'm also working for McKinsey's external advisor. This is part of the study that you're going to see, guys, tomorrow at lunchtime. Trade internationally, in terms of GDP, as a percentage of GDP, trade of flows of goods, services, and finance flows are falling in terms of the percentage of the GDP. But look, the flow of data. Flow of data is growing, along with the number of internet users growing in the whole world. And that data brings a lot of value. Of course, people are connected to many platforms. Facebook has more than 1.5 billion users. YouTube, for example, has more than 1 billion. That's transforming completely the media industry. Completely. That's trade. We watch videos from YouTube anywhere. And the business behind that is huge. Advertising business. Huge behind that. So the whole business is growing, and also it has a huge impact on the e-commerce numbers. Today, about 12% of the goods traded internationally are e-traded. And that's going to keep on growing, no matter what happens. No matter what happens with the trade agreements, and I'm sure Susan is going to talk about that. A great job analyzing the trade agreements. And no matter what happens with the trade agreements, the value for people is so large that governments cannot stop it. And of course, agreements like the TPPs are going to encourage the growth of e-commerce. Look at a very conservative trend. In 2020, the growth is going to be $1 trillion traded on e-commerce in the world, and more than almost 1 billion people doing e-commerce internationally in 2020. That's a reality, and that's going to hit all the numbers. And just to finish this number, this is the analysis of the last 10 years in terms of the impact of trade in GDP. It has, according to the McKinsey Global Institute, a 10% impact in the growth of the GDP. But 3 points of that is due to data flows. So we focus a lot on trade of goods, trade of services, the flow of people, migration, FDI, but now we have to focus as well on how e-trade is impacting big time the new economy. And the issue here is, what are the right policies? What are the right policies to make sure that these changes do not have a negative impact on equality? That this opportunity has a positive impact in the reduction of poverty in the world. That's the issue. That's what we have to work on. What is what we have to do to make sure that with the new technology revolution, the world is a better world? Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Diego. Well, we all know Michael already. Michael, would you, the floor is yours.
Thanks. Yeah, they're in there. Okay. Probably 2 copies of them. There we go. This one? Ferrantino. Okay. Thanks. So I've got the least colorful presentation here today, and I'll have to make it up for it by attempting to be colorful myself. I'm here to tell you about something called Aid for E-Trade, which most of you have probably never heard of, but if you continue to be interested in this topic, you will hear of it very soon. It is one of these ideas that, in the world of the internet, things can become viral very quickly, and I'm going to describe something like that. So Aid for E-Trade is a proposed broad coalition of public and private partners who can contribute to achieving significant improvements in the ability of developing countries and countries with economies in transition to use and benefit from e-commerce. So you've heard about, the benefits of e-commerce for entrepreneurship, the ability of e-commerce to bring in the poor, to promote shared prosperity, and it's an exciting prospect, but you've also heard that there are impediments. And so the overall goal of this effort is to raise awareness of the challenges that countries face relating to e-commerce and to mobilize resources for the implementation of priority products, and also to strengthening coherence and synergies in stakeholders' activities. And I actually don't believe I wrote that on a slide because I've always been uncomfortable with the word stakeholders. It's something that if you come from the Midwest like I do, it's a very Washington word. I always thought the stakeholder was the person who holds a stake for a vampire slayer. But basically, the idea here is that if countries are engaging in e-commerce as a matter of national policy, they ought to have a strategy. So where did this idea come from? It actually came more or less from one person, Kati Suominen, who is not here today, but who is a Renaissance person. She is an international economist, a business school professor, a venture capitalist, a think tank expert, and she had this idea that there was a capacity for E-Trade to reduce poverty, and this had been illustrated by some research that had come out of eBay, who had generously allowed some of their data to be used by researchers to establish the astonishing fact that when people trade over a platform like eBay, there's no economic distance between them. Conventional trade, basically what we find is that the volume of it tapers off. The further countries are from each other in physical space, the further apart they are in language, these effects disappear on the internet. It's as if everybody is in one place. And so she wrote this paper, Aid for E-Trade, Accelerating the Global E-Commerce Revolution, while she was sitting here in Washington at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. And this was an idea that immediately caught on. People passed it around. They asked what to do next. Sooner or later, somebody saw it at UNCTAD in Geneva, and they got excited about it. And so there was a broad stakeholders meeting, there it is again, in Geneva just this February, where they brought together a group of about 36 very diverse people, including entrepreneurs like Daniel and Aziz, including ministers like Diego, including delegates to the World Trade Organization, including big firms like eBay and PayPal, and operators of large platforms like TradeSift, and folks from international organizations like Martine and me. And over the course of 3 days, we thrashed out a platform, a statement on what Aid for E-Trade would consist of. And just 2 weeks ago, during UNCTAD's E-Week, there was a public rollout of this idea. So now people are starting to hear about it. And UNCTAD, as an institution, will attempt to get, buy-in from all their members at their Nairobi conference this summer. And so there are a lot of things that people want to do and a lot of people who are excited about this. So what do we seek to address through Aid for E-Trade? Presuming that we can get it off the ground, that we can get the word out, that we can get interested in it. Some of the donors who've been involved traditionally in the Aid for Trade process through the World Trade Organization, through the Enhanced International Framework, and through other processes like this. So there are 6 pillar areas in Aid for E-Trade. The first is working with countries for readiness assessments and strategy formulation. And one of the things that involves is developing indicators and developing evidence-based analysis and theories of change as to what you should do depending on the way you look like according to a set of metrics. And what metrics are we talking about? You've already heard about things like what percentage of people in my country have access to broadband, have access to a bank account or to credit cards. What percentage of people are buying online? What is the smaller percentage of firms in a country that are selling online? And then deeper questions. If you could ask the people in a country who are selling to the national market, those firms, would they prefer to have another million people on the margins have access to internet for the first time, or would they like to have higher speed in the urban areas, right? Because capital investments use scarce resources and you can't get everything at the same time. What would you like to do first? We're just at the point where we're starting to ask these questions, let alone assemble data and analysis to deal with them. Second thing, almost all these things have been referred to already, which gives me comfort that we were looking at the right issues, is ICT infrastructure and services, the extension of broadband and the internet out into the world. Trade logistics and trade facilitation. So, not only having delivery services extend to everywhere, but in dealing with particular impediments that are important for e-commerce. So when we work with countries in implementing the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement, making customs work online for small traders so that you don't have to wander from office to office to office in the capital to deal with 25 different government agencies that you may be present for some regulatory purpose at the border. You'd like to contact them through the internet. That's great. But what happens, can you file the documents online? That depends on whether in your country an electronic signature is recognized as a legal instrument. And what if your commercial law doesn't apply, doesn't allow for that? So, we found people who are traditional customs experts having to learn about internet governance. You've heard a lot about payment solutions, and I come up with the same number that you've already heard. At a minimum, there are a billion people in the world who potentially have access online but don't have credit cards. Legal and regulatory frameworks. The regulations for banking, for telecom, for corporate law were in many countries designed long before anybody even thought of the internet or e-commerce. And so if you wish to set up a small platform, if you wish to be the Amazon of Macedonia, I have met the entrepreneur who fought to be the Amazon of Macedonia. What happens by the Amazon, I mean the platform that sells many, many different things. And so you try to apply to the government to be that business, and they say, oh, you're selling food, please fill out this stack of forms. You're selling pharmaceuticals, please fill out this stack of forms. You are selling music and software. And by the time you're done, you find that the engagement you have with the government is not anything like you would have thought if you thought you were just setting up a website to do business. And then e-commerce skills development. You've heard about some of this. Daniel addressed this. So what happens? You can start by selling through a platform, and that's one way to do it. And that's how a lot of firms start. So there are companies with email, they don't sell online at all, right? They may sell through a platform. How do you get to where you have your own website? So you have your own website. How do you get from the point to where you're just showing a picture of the merchandise and your phone number is on there or your email is on there to the point where you can actually deal with the customer, accept payments, delivery, deal with returns, and other issues. So there are a lot of things that together make up what in the World Development Report we called the analog complements to surround the digital environment for commerce. And we look forward to making progress on all these fronts. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. We have been my panelists have been extremely diligent with the time, so we still have half a session as planned for Q&A. Maybe if you want to join me on the table, we can take a few questions, and we'll open up the discussion for questions, comments. The idea is having as much of an exchange of ideas as we can. So happy to hear your views. We'll take a few questions and comments and open it. Right, please, madam.
Thank you. My name is Li Yang. Thanks for all this organization and presentation. But I think this all start with a new business, and you got the new investment, and then you start all the idea you want to work, and as an entrepreneur and as a good business, successful adventure. So my question is, for all this process, you are going to encounter a lot of new problem that you never think of. So I just wonder, if the bank give you trouble, or if you have the revenue in your account, they get lost, or your partner, they don't really give you the success inventory or supply or something, how are you going to solve this kind of problems? Is there any special non-profit organization who are willing to help this new entrepreneur firm? Or how are they going to deal with this?
We'll take a few more. Madam?
Yeah, good afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Rosemary Sequeiro. I'm the president of a company called Sequeiros International Group. We focus on SMEs, small and medium businesses, looking at financing the small and medium businesses to grow as big companies. And looking at your presentation, thank you so much. Recently at the IMF World Meeting, we talked about what we are talking here, and then we said, as the minister said, in Africa, we have mostly cell phones. In the rural area there, we have more cell phones than people. These people using the cell phones. So how do we make these people use the same cell phones to empower them, like in money transfer, like, we're working with the Treasury Department here. In fact, my group, young people from Africa, will be demonstrating at the US Treasury on getting money from here to the M-Pesa in Kenya. In Kenya, we already have a platform for money transfer. How do we do this, looking at your platform, selling and buying? And secondly, how do we include people with disability, the blind people, the deaf people, and other disabilities, to use these platforms to empower them? How do we include them into this e-commerce because of their disability, treating just like what you are saying? And how do we include the people of disability into these platforms, looking at the deaf people, blind people, and other disabilities who want to become entrepreneurs? And how do we work with you as startup, working with those people in the rural area of Africa and other countries? Thank you.
We have a question over there.
Hi, my name is Roman Torres. I'm a student in the ITIP program here at the Elio School. So I think all of you touched a little bit on the policy environment and the investment ecosystems in these sort of topics. And I was wondering, just from your experiences, if there have been maybe some success stories or maybe some trends that you can point to. I know Mr. Molano spoke about how you have to create a new set of rules for a new set of banks, and how that sort of started to move things around. So I'm just curious about just the different policy approaches that you can think of that could serve as models for other people or other countries to adopt as well.
Thank you. Daniel Crosby in the back.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you for your presentation today. My name is Daniel Crosby, and I manage the office of a law firm called King & Spalding in Geneva. And my question is, for all of you, when we see these new developments in opportunities, sometimes governments try to say, how can I protect against that and use it to develop my local competitors and have local champions? And I'm wondering, from the perspective of the businesses who use the technology and from the governments who promote them in the World Bank side, what is your policy advice to the actors and the governments? Should there be open competition on these platforms for everyone, or should there be some kind of opportunity to shield governments, or should it be just open competition? Thanks.
Thank you. We may take one or two more if there are. Maya.
Thank you. Maya Angelkovich from the World Bank, and just a quick one. We're often asked, how does e-commerce impact jobs? All of our client countries, as we call them, want to know how they can use e-commerce and digital economy tools to create jobs. So from the point of view of you, Mr. Vega, and also from the point of view of the entrepreneurs, could you help us a little bit think more deeply about this question? Because in some instances, you might think that e-commerce firms are actually destroying jobs. Is that true? Can one weave a true or a factual narrative around why we need e-commerce for the future of the job agenda?
Let me use my prerogative as the moderator to squeeze in a question from my own crop. And actually, I just wanted to develop on the questions that Lillian and Rosemary posed. They mentioned, when you, as a new business, you constantly face new challenges. Some of them you can predict, some of them you cannot. And on that, I wanted to say, both Aziz and Daniel were very successful participants of some of the World Bank funded programs that we called incubators, led here by Maya. We will hear more about them later. But based on the questions that Liliana and Rosemary posed, I wanted to see, how did these incubators play a role in the ability to face these new challenges? And now that, after that, you have grown and your business have grown, how would you address that different from the experience that you had at the time? So we have a few questions, and I'll leave it to you. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I think the first question I wanted to actually just attempt to answer is with regards to what role does government play in terms of ensuring that whether it's protecting or enabling the local competition. And maybe my answer to that would be government should really promote fairness. And why I say that is because I'm just looking at local examples within South Africa. I'll give an example. When Uber came into South Africa, there was probably around 3 companies who were doing the same thing, in essence. But as soon as Uber came in, when it comes to Uber's budget of marketing, and more importantly, the operations budget, these local companies did not stand a chance of actually competing with such a company, because the local, they're really unable to raise as much funds and really capture as much market as Uber did. So my answer to that was just ensure that government can promote fairness. I don't know how it does that. I don't know how we keep that, let's just say, objective instead of subjective, but ideally that's the role that government should play. So at least local startups have the ability to also just grow and become sustainable. And with regards to e-commerce affecting jobs, I think our company is also a good example in terms of how e-commerce can affect jobs, because we connect international visitors to local community-based tour guides who otherwise wouldn't be able to actually access these visitors. And what you're able to see is that for 2 visitors who book a tour within a community like Kubus, which is where you can actually see the Nama people or the Khoisan people, you're getting a guide would be able to employ a substitute guide, an administrator, and also get local people within their community, like your caterers, to actually play a role in a tour. So off 1 booking, you get 4 people playing a role. So imagine if you're able to do this on a consistent basis across various communities within the continent. That's how we see e-commerce playing a role in terms of creating sustainable jobs and building local entrepreneurs at a local level.
All right, so I'll try to, say very little on, all the questions that have been asked. Do not hesitate to stop me if people are falling asleep or something. So first of all, in terms of the unexpected problems that might occur, I think that, as Martin elegantly said, I think that incubators and partnerships in general are here for that matter. I think, any entrepreneur that starts at some point is going to be is going to face, unexpected difficulties. For one thing, the entrepreneur in himself has to have the personality to deal with this. So resilience is probably usually cited as the number 1 quality that an entrepreneur can and should have: resilience, determination, what have you. And also, the idea is to have the necessary partnerships either with incubators or with, state banking partners, etc., to face this. So, you'll talk to a lot of entrepreneurs who, because they had a healthy relationship with their banks, were able to overcome a lot of difficulties. So that's the one. The question on the use of cell phones. So as I said, people are using their cell phones more and more. The banking system really in Africa right now is a system that relies heavily on phones. So people are using their phones to make payments, to get a lot of information. And when we say phone, we don't mean these. Right? We mean 2G cell phones that are accessible to most of the population. And so, these right now are used for a variety of reasons, but the operators, because when you're talking about phones, you're talking about the operators have to understand. Some of them do a great job of that. I would say Orange has done a great job of it, to understand their markets, to understand the people they're selling their services to, and to adapt. You ask a great question on people with disabilities. I would say that when it comes to ICTs in general, a lot of people are disabled. You mentioned, for example, people who are blind. A lot of people, at least in our background, a lot of people cannot read. Okay, so they're in a very similar situation. I think one way that's great to counter that is to use the community. So, a lot of times you'll have in one family one person that can read, and that person is the one gathering information for everybody, and then that person is the one guiding everybody. So that's one great solution, kind of a communal way, basically, of dealing with disabilities. I think that's the only thing you can do: solidarity, help, etc. In terms of the policy advice, which is another great question. Actually, Martin mentioned that CTIC is an incubator that was. First of all, that started, and then that's still collaborating with Infodev of the World Bank on. That's how it was started, and we're still working with them on a few projects. And one of them, a very interesting project, is a project to kind of harmonize, if you will, and I didn't have time to delve into that, but to harmonize markets on a regional scale. So to make sure that you're not only thinking about how to sell your product in Senegal, but you're thinking about how to sell your products in Ivory Coast, in Ghana, and in other countries elsewhere. And I think that exporting the products for local startups is crucial. I think we live in a world that whether governments want it or not, whether the stakeholders want it or not, is globalized, and where you're going to be exposed to products and services from elsewhere on a daily basis. It's going to happen. It's not a matter anymore of whether you can protect them from it or not. I think it's just going to happen. And so what you have to do is you have to, as Daniel rightly said, make sure that your local businesses are competitive, are providing the value to basically be in business against companies coming from elsewhere, but also actually and that's something that their focus is not there right now. But local startups and local businesses have to start thinking about how they can export their products and services. How does it impact job? There's a lot of side businesses, so to speak. So, for example, we think a lot about e-commerce. We don't think about what happens in the back office. For example, how do you deliver the product that you're selling from if you're in a rural setting? How do you get it all the way downtown? There's a lot of different side jobs. When it comes to Uber, that was mentioned again by Daniel. People don't know all the things that Uber does. Again in the back office. So it might be training, it might be delivery. There's a lot of things that come into it, and because these startups also become profitable. For example, if they're farmers, they're able to hire a lot more people just because they have a lot more money. So that's one very obvious impact. And I think I've said enough about incubators at this point, and I'll just leave the floor. Thank you.
Let me start with the last one, which is the jobs issue. We are destroying jobs big time, no doubt about it. A few months ago, I was with the former CEO of Kodak. Remember Kodak? I asked him, Antonio, how many employees did you have in the 90s? He said, I had almost 200,000 jobs, 200,000 employees. Today, Kodak went into Chapter 11, and it is now a different company. It owns the brand, and that's a huge value. That's it. No jobs. But I asked him, how many jobs did you create or did you have really in the world? He said, we had millions of people developing our roles or films everywhere. My own grandfather, he was the photographer. He had a little shop in his little town, and of course, he doesn't have a job now. And a few months ago, I went to Facebook to visit Marnie Levine, who was here in DC, and she moved to be the COO of Instagram. And I asked her, Marnie, how many employees do you have? 53. So, which is now the platform, Instagram is the platform that handles the largest number of pictures in the world. So from millions to 53, definitely we're destroying jobs. And that's where the policies come. The first main role of the government and the first policies, there are 5 types of policies. The first 3 are talent, talent, and talent. So the main issue here is educating people for the new economy. That's key. We lack of ICT engineers everywhere. In the US, the lack of engineers is almost 2 million. In Europe, the same thing. We measured that in Colombia, 93,000 engineers are needed. In Chile, 70,000 already measured. In Panama, 5,000 everywhere. There is no engineers. But that's not the only issue. I personally took doctors, just graduated from the best universities in Colombia. And I conducted focus groups with them and asked them about big data. They had no clue what that is. I asked them about the cloud. They have no clue what that is. So the issue is not only about having the technical guys, it's having the right IT skills in every single profession. And we are not doing that in the world. Today, you take the developing world, the most important health issue today is the Zika virus. The solution has to be with technology, especially big data. And doctors have no clue what big data is in general terms. So we really need to change the way we educate people everywhere. We need to of course, develop more skills in people. That's key. Talent, talent, and talent. That should be the focus of governments, because protecting markets is not the way to do it. It's not the way to do it. I'm helping Macri's government now in Argentina, for example, and the previous government created this zone in the Patagonia, where they build technology. And we're, so now they have very expensive cell phones and computers in Argentina because importations were forbidden unless they were made locally. And the impact of that in the economy is billions of dollars, billions. Because we need to have everybody with access, that's key. And the last issue I want to address is people with disabilities. Of course, it's a huge opportunity to give them tools to move to another level. In Colombia, we focused a lot on that, and we achieved a lot. Colombia is the only country in the whole world where blind people can download the right applications to browse on the net in any terminal for free. Because usually the best applications, every license costs in the US about $1,000. In the Colombia, it's completely free, the same types of applications. In Colombia, blind people go to the movies. Deaf people talk on the phone for free, anywhere in the country. So there is a lot of opportunities to empower people with disabilities with technology.
Thanks. Yeah, I'd also like to address jobs and also to address competition, because we know that good things can come out of competition, but also scary things for some people. And I appreciate the example about Kodak. I guess that's the new buggy whips, right? And so this is, I get the point about jobs, but I would also be wary of somebody having set up a regulatory regime that would have prevented Instagram from rising in order to protect Kodak, because Instagram also has commercial uses, by the way. So when we talk about supporting small and medium-sized enterprises, what we're hearing is that a lot of them operate on very narrow margins in a competitive environment. So cost is important, and one of the things that makes a difference is it's not just whether you're online, it's what does it cost you for your monthly subscription to the internet service provider? What does it cost you for the device? And the cost of a monthly subscription from one developing country to another, what I've seen, there's huge differences. It could be a factor of 10 or 20 or more, depending on how the local market is set up. And the first part of that is whether or not all providers have access to the internet backbone. So one of the things that we do in the World Bank is we actually are still investing in the undersea cables that go around Africa. There are still people investing in the cables that go out to Tonga and Samoa. Some of these countries have really just come online recently, not to mention all the people being connected by satellite and other models. So when you build that infrastructure and then you set up the interface where somebody in the government is going to decide who can access that, do you make sure that all ISP providers can access this backbone you just built, or do you hand it over turnkey to the government telecom monopoly and let them charge whatever they want? And that's actually an issue that we address, and we in fact don't do this kind of infrastructure project at the World Bank unless we've ensured that when we hand it over, there's going to be competitive access. And at the end of the day, the onion farmer whoever it may be, the producer of jams and jellies, that's going to influence their cost to accessing this network. Then we talk about competition and retailing, and this is where a lot of, I think, the biggest fears are. If you go to certain places, and I have in particular in mind South Asia, where there are a lot of small retailers, and they see Walmart as a threat to small retailers, and they see Amazon as like another Walmart out in space. And it's very scary for them. And if you tell them that Walmart is also online, then it's even scarier yet. And so I can say all the sorts of things that I would say as an economist about that you have to weigh the benefits for consumers for having more choice, lower prices, against all these retailers that you're going to drive out of business. That's one thing that has to be resolved through the political process. But the other thing is that if you go and you set up barriers to the big people being online, how do you do it without setting up barriers to your own citizens who are the small and medium-sized startups? Can you distinguish between the one and the other in your regulatory regime? I don't know that you can, even if that's a great idea. And then what about jobs and what about competition in parts of the economy where still lots and lots of people in the world work, like agriculture, which is naturally competitive, where margins are a life and death thing? And I was actually fascinated to see that two of our presenters have already talked about agriculture and what is the benefit of this sort of e-commerce to these people, that it cuts out the middleman. You heard it mentioned glancingly, okay? But if you are herding livestock in a place like Sudan, okay, never mind until you get out of the country to Saudi Arabia or whatever, the markup between where you are driving your herd and what it is in Port Sudan is unknown to you, but it is large and variable because there's 2 or 3 middlemen. The huge thing that a platform like this does to bring that rural producer very close to the consumer is that it isn't just bringing access to the market. It is, when you cut out that middleman, it's not only that the consumer gets that product for cheaper, it's that the farmer gets a lot more. And that makes a difference as to whether you can employ people and expand your business. And so I think there's a lot of potential to create jobs and also raise wages and incomes for people who are involved with this. It really depends on how we understand it.
Thank you. We have time, and I believe there are a few more questions from the audience, so we can have a second round. Questions and opinions are always welcome.
My name is Saf Philly, a member of the Internet Society, Washington, D.C., from Sierra Leone, background in IT and telecom. My question is for the Honorable Minister and the World Bank. Now we have the Digital Trade Conference. From now onwards to 2020, we're going to have nearly 5 billion cell phones on the planet, but the trade should start in the classroom environment. If the classroom, they don't know the background of trade, you can't trade on the international platform. There the ICT comes in, the school-going children. And the third one, my question is how ICT will play to transform the educational sector for children yesterday, today, and tomorrow, be part of this digital trade. This is my question for you.
More questions?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for your presentation. I'm Simone Franzi, from PhD student at Virginia Tech, and I have a question for all of you. You presented many examples where digital trade can help small and medium-sized enterprises, and I'm just thinking about the urban and rural differences, and if digital trade can help just urban settlement and develop new businesses, or it can really also help in a rural space to grow, to do more trade and to develop. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rayhan. I'm a student at George Washington University. I have a question about in terms of talent and skill. So there are a lot of people want to start up a company. Especially in agriculture, not a lot of people know how to use the internet, but not a lot of people know how to use, especially big data or statistical models or R programming and stuff like that. So how would you be able to bring in talent, say from Silicon Valley or anywhere else in the world, to help those people, or how do you expect to teach the people how to use those platforms to help their own companies grow?
Thank you. Great panel. My name is Jean-François Boitin, and I have a question that is based on time that I spent in Burkina Faso with one of my kids who was Peace Corps officer there. And we have this wonderful tool, internet, digital trade, to develop economy in developing countries. Is there any risk that because we have this tool, we forget about the development of infrastructures, very basic stuff, roads, bridges, and so on, because there are lots of countries in Africa, I mean a continent where I've traveled a little bit, that won't be able to really benefit totally from digital trade if this infrastructure problem, very basic, is not solved.
There's one more question from online, okay, which is, what will be the impact of the mega regional companies on digital trade? So not a multinational firm like an Amazon or an eBay or PayPal, but a mega regional, and what impact they will have on both individuals and access to e-commerce, as well as then small firms who are looking to grow. Do they simply get captured by a mega regional, or are they able to develop given the regulatory framework?
And let me abuse again of my position of having the mic. And I wanted to continue one of your comments, Aziz. You mentioned how important it is for producers to become exporters, to use the power of e-commerce and the ability of the digital technology of reducing distances, not to only sell to your community, but to sell abroad. How do you, in your experience, where is the big gap and where are the big challenges from a farmer to becoming an e-commerce farmer, and from one e-commerce farmer to becoming an e-commerce exporter? What are the big challenges and where are the differences? And then I had one question for Diego. Diego, during the time of as the Minister of ICT in Colombia, what was your relationship with the Minister of Commerce? Were some of these policies coordinated? And in particular, did you see a role for the work of the trade ministries, in particular in trade negotiations, in support of ICT policies? Thanks, sir.
I'll start with your last question because it's related somewhat to the question of this gentleman who went to Burkina Faso. I think the people using e-commerce to develop trade, at least a big number of people using e-commerce to develop trade, especially if you're talking maybe about Africa or about anything and anything in rural settings, are the first ones who need the infrastructure to catch up because the challenges are impacted somewhat by trade, but by the digitalization of trade, but none of them are not solved. So if you're in a rural setting in Ivory Coast or in Ghana, and you all of a sudden people in Burkina Faso know about you, the potential is great. But if you're gonna export to these people, you need to have roads that you can use to send your products away. For you to even get there, you need the internet to be good. So in terms of infrastructure, there's the two go hand in hand. Actually, they don't go one against the other. The digitalization of trade, at least in Africa, is not something that's going to take place fully if the infrastructures do not follow suit. And it's kind of related to what you're saying, because the big challenge is at some point with farmers, peasants, etc. People that want to start exporting beyond the obvious things. So you have obviously the fact that they need to understand technology, which is not always the case when they start. One big difficulty is they need to understand the markets that they're trying to go to, actually. And so one big thing is actually in the program that we're going to work with in InfoDev, one thing that we're going to try to have is mentors coming from other countries that are able to give them an idea of the place that they're going to. What's the culture there? How do people buy? How do people sell, etc. So I think you need to understand the market, but there again, you need the infrastructure to cater to what you're trying to do in terms of internationalization, basically. So you also asked a question, by the way, and it's the same answer on what would we do now that we weren't doing at the time, and I would say that that's what we would do. That we would ready our entrepreneurs for an international market rather than for just a national market. And by the way, you've got rocket internet right now that's come to Senegal, and so the competition is already there. The local startups have to start being ready to be in business against them. Interesting question on how talent basically goes to rural settings or rural areas, etc. I think one interesting thing is if you're a big data expert, for example. I think the challenge is more for you to learn about how to have an impact, to learn about the either the industry or the sector that you're trying to have an impact on, rather than on the professionals of that sector trying to learn about what you're doing. So obviously it's important for farmers. I use the example of farmers a lot, but Daniel told me that his mother sold African art, if I'm not mistaken. So you've got people making art, sculptures, etc., that are trying to sell those. The challenge is obviously on them to be internet ready, understand how to post their content, etc. But the challenge is more for if the use of big data, maybe the Internet of Things, etc., is going to be spread. The challenge is more on the actors of these sectors, the technological sectors, to understand the sectors that they're trying to have an impact on. So to study a lot more actually what they're doing. So and I say this, we're part of a Internet of Things big data program, and I think it's taking us something like 6 months to just get an idea of how the stakeholders that we're trying to have an impact on can use the technology that we're trying to propose. So the challenge is more on us. There was a question on the different policies. I think it was coming from a gentleman there on the different policies that I've seen that I've seen used. I think Diego gave one fantastic answer. We've been pushing for the creation of internet ministries, and that's a recommendation that's been recommended. It's been sent out there everywhere to have ministries that are specifically focused on what happens in ICT, and that then can propose the right regulatory environments. But sometimes these go through, sometimes these don't. In terms of trade digitalization having an impact in urban settings, I would say that in urban settings, people usually operate and use, and first of all, they trade in ways similar to what happens in countries where these technologies have been developed. So I'm not saying that it's not something that's going to happen. I'm saying in these places, actually, digitalization is used to facilitate trade, I think, more so than to create new trade relationships. So I'm not saying it's not going to happen. It might, but I think the trend is going to be something quite similar to what you might find in either Washington, D.C. or New York, unless I think one sector that might be very well impacted neglected in urban settings is transport, actually. So we'll have to look at what can happen there. Yeah, I think that I've covered everything. Thank you.
So let me first address the two questions that were directed to me. The first one is, Martin, your question about my relationship with the Minister of Trade. I was really thinking about that. I think it was very, very close to the point that I married his chief of staff. So in the plan we deployed in Colombia, every single ministry had to have their own ICT plan. Everybody. And not only at the ministerial level, at regional levels, every single governor, every single mayor, everybody has to be aligned with this goal of transforming the country with technology, especially reducing poverty. With the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, the first issue we tackled was the poor connectivity of SMEs. When we started in 2010, just 7% of SMEs were connected to internet. We went from 7% to 76% in 3 years. Focusing on developing applications for them, focusing not only on connecting them, it was just creating value for them on the net. Michael talks about the price of the internet. Who cares about the price, Michael? The price is not the issue there. The value of internet is not in the connectivity, it's in the application. That's where the value is. So of course we have to push prices down. But the value for people is what they get using internet. Like when I would go to Colombia in the middle of the jungle, people would tell me, "Oh, internet, that's very, very cheap." How come? It was like $10 a month, which is very expensive for them. Many people cannot afford it. But people do say, "Oh, that's a subsidized price," and people will say, "Oh, but I'm saving 3 trips to the capital every month because now with internet, I can save those trips." One day a lady said, "For me, it is very cheap. Before, I had to rent a place in Medellin, in a big city, to go to study. Now I go there just once in a while, and I am here in my hometown, and I save that money." One day a guy told me, "The price of this is huge. Before the internet was here, we had 16 kids in this rural community with, how you call that, paladar hendido, labio leporino in English, like cleft palate. And then thanks to the internet, some doctors came here and operated all of them, and one of them is my daughter. That has no price, like MasterCard, So the value of internet is in the use of it. So that's critical. So we went from 7% to 76% of SMEs connected. But we did the same thing with every single minister. With the labor minister, we created a teleworking program. More than 350,000 people got jobs thanks to teleworking. With the Minister of Housing, we made sure that every single new house, especially in the base of a pyramid for poor people, came with internet and a computer. Every single one was involved. And of course, we have a very close relationship in terms of international trades and the agreements. The second question, it was about ICT in education. I think the person that did that question left, but there is huge opportunities there. First of all, in managing education, in managing schools. I mean, the one big issue here is the poor management of the education system, the payroll systems, the managing the assets of the schools, so on and so forth. And in terms of, connecting poor schools to the internet and giving kids tablets, that's completely worthless. That's money lost. Unless there is a very clear, a comprehensive strategy to use the internet in the classroom or in the school. And that strategy has to include parents. And that's the success of Colombia. We included parents in that strategy.
Okay, I'm going to do something really risky here. I'm just going to take the one question that hasn't been addressed yet, and that's our Twitter question about the threat to our internet SMEs being bought out by larger companies. And so I'm going to say, I don't know, but I want to bounce it down the table to Daniel, who's an actual entrepreneur, and Aziz, who works with entrepreneurs. And maybe the way I'm formulating this question comes from having watched too many episodes of Shark Tank. But this is what I want to ask. So suppose somebody came to you or to one of the folks you work with, even someone from outside your country, and said, I'd like to buy this business that you have worked so hard to build up and take all these risks, give you, 2 or 3 or 5 times your current valuation, and, you could use that money to start the next thing. Would you see that as a threat or as an opportunity or something that could never possibly happen?
Yeah, I guess it depends on the timing. Because at this current stage, my team and I basically feel we're still building this company out. There's still a lot we actually want to achieve with the company. But 5 years' time, for 5 times the value, if we achieve our targets, I guess that means the business is sold. But it's really based on the founder and, more importantly, the board and the founding team at the specific time. Do they feel they can add a lot more value to the company? If not, then I guess it's probably time to sell. That's just a personal opinion.
Do you want to take it, Aziz?
Sure. Just to answer that question. Thank you for bringing it back. Okay, just 30 seconds actually. One of the companies that I mentioned, Mluma, actually works in partnership with Orange, which in this case kind of applies as the MIGA regional company. That's a very technical term. And I would say that they would not have been able to have the impact. Again, one of the more used payment systems in Senegal is USSD, that allows you to pay using A2G, a very simple cell phone. And I would say they would not have been able to have the same impact without working with Orange, working close partnership with that MIGA regional partner. So I think it depends, first of all, on what impact you're trying to have and what your objectives are. It depends on the timing. Sometimes it's what you need to do in order to have a broader impact. Sometimes it's not. And it's a very personal decision from business to business that you have to take in consideration the right factors.
All right, well, we are past our time. I understand that there is a couple of questions still in the audience. We'll ask you to keep it for the next session if possible. Well, let me thank the panel again. And we have a 10-minute break for a coffee.
Yes, so we have a 10-minute break for coffee. If you exit the room and take a left down the hallway, there's a lounge around the back. Coffee, water, sodas are available. Thank you.
Thank you very much.